Hello everybody, WF572 here, and welcome back to World End Economica, Volume 1. Last time, we found out a bit about, well, the main character, I guess. I can't be asked to remember the name, oh gosh. Yoshiharu Kawaura. Yeesh. That is one heck of a name in my opinion, but it definitely sounds awesome. So then, nothing good could come from wandering around downtown in the middle of the day. After jumping from one building to the next, I decided to walk down a deserted hallway towards my favorite Chinese restaurant. It was the time of day when most people my age would be at school, so walking around carelessly would get you chased down by the cops before you knew it. True. Until you turn 18, the legal age here, it was mandatory that you belonged to some sort of educational institution. Some people would say that this was a good thing, while others grumbled something about government-funded programs. I fell into neither camp. My way of dealing with systems I didn't like was to quietly escape them, not to loudly criticize them. On that note, this area, with all its complicated passages and extreme elevation changes, it's not odd to see the 7th floor of one building be next to the basement of another. Oh gosh. That is kinda crazy in my opinion. It was convenient for people like me. So, something like this. Yeah, I'm not exactly surprised. Not to mention the overgrown vegetation here and there that acted as good cover. Yeah, I kind of see some vegetation, not too much though. These plants weren't originally included in the city's plans, but had leaked out of one of the many lunar laboratories where they were messing with their genes. Oh shit. Friggin' experiments, man. Supposedly, genes had tons of factors that express themselves differently depending on the environment. So, a lot of plants and animals started acting strangely as soon as they were brought to the moon. Huh. There were even people saying that life forms on Earth could have originated from outer space and brought to Earth via the moon. Some of these plants grew so well on the moon's inorganic matter that you might wonder if they'd been around here for a million years. Of course, it wasn't as if these plants were free from the laws of physics. Sorry. Nitrogen and other nutrients for them were often brought over from Earth. So I hadn't heard about any worries that the surface of the moon would be taken over by the greenery. This applied to more than just plants. As for the humans here, it didn't matter how many ultra-elite think tanks came to energize the lunar economy and its industries. Life here just wasn't sustainable without sending a lot of things over from Earth. Yeah. For example, we need oxygen, and in order for that to happen, we need trees. Kind of a thing. According to the government's statements, even if the orbital elevator... Why am I always yawning so much? Even if the orbital elevator were to stop moving today, There was currently enough biomass here to create an enclosed recycling-based environment. Oh. In other words, we'd be able to... In other words, we'd be able to eat food, crap it out, then use that crap to grow more food to eat and so on and so forth. Oh gosh. Well, it's... Oh. Well, shit. They'd be able to make a ton of electricity with solar panels while collecting direct sunlight to use as a super hot source of heat. So maybe they're right. I mean, people even say that Earth was in more danger environmentally, since they're still relying on oil and nuclear power. Yeah, we definitely are. And gosh, those nuke plants. I didn't know who was right. Whatever the case, I had dreams. If it meant making my dreams come true, I didn't care if I was on Earth or on the moon. After all, my dream was to stand at the forefront of humanity. The forefront of humanity, I wonder what that's for. It'd be a place where you could only look forward and live by advancing onward. Who cared about what happened to the world behind you? Well, yeah. But they do say, what is it? Learn from history so that you won't repeat the same mistakes. So basically, if we learn our past history, then we're unlikely to make the same mistakes in the future. However, it still occurs no matter what because some people are so stupid. Little rant there. And if I couldn't make this dream come true, then there'd be no reason for me to live. That was why, to put it logically, I never worried a single bit about the moon's environment or whatever. What I worried about was how much money I made and how fast I reached my goals. Oh jeez. While I was thinking about these things, I passed through the thickly vegetated tunnel towards high ground. It was a clear day, as it always was. On the other side of a translucent membrane, visible half of the mist-covered Earth looked small. The sky over the Lunar Sea was wrapped in a see-through dome, and right beyond it was outer space. So, yeah, I thought this might have been a dome. But yeah, you can definitely see that those are panels. But what the hell is that freaking... what was it? Tony Stark's heart thing or whatever? Yeesh. Gravity was weak on the moon, so you couldn't naturally keep large amounts of gases stored up on the surface. Also, while apparently each 24-hour day on Earth had a morning, afternoon, and night, which was followed the next day by another morning, the moon alternated between 2 weekdays and 2 weeknights. Oh yeah. That is right, because the moon's, what is it? The moon's rotation is constantly different than Earth or any other planet. However, the human body cycle was set differently, thanks to tens of thousands of years of living on Earth. Yeah, pretty much. Because most of the people living on the moon were immigrants from Earth, its dome was adjusted to give off light in an Earth-like way. It even had sprinklers attached to it so that it would rain. However, I'd only seen things like downpours and thunderstorms in videos. When it rained here, it was always just a drizzle. Strong winds never blew here. I'm not surprised, because that would mean a heck of a lot more effort and other technologies. The only winds felt here were the slow, coiling movement of the atmosphere due to centrifugal and Coriolis forces. Wow. I don't know about that force. I'm gonna have to look that up. As well as the gentle breeze of the air inside the dome being mechanically circulated. I strayed from the street onto a grass-covered cliff and jumped upward with a grunt. I kicked off a tree branch and rotated my body to land on the top of the tunnel. This was a box seat where you can look down on the greater part of the city. Now this, right here. This seems to be a pretty damn good view. Nice. I grabbed some beef jerky out of my bag and bit into it. According to the guys who came from Earth, this wasn't at all close to the real thing. But it's the only beef jerky I knew. Oh, great. So basically, it's beef jerky made on the moon. Awesome. There were a number of cities on the moon. The one I lived in was the very first city to be created, and I could get a clear view of the whole thing from here. The spot in front of me where pointed skyscrapers sprung upward one after the other was called Newton City. So this right here is Newton City. It wasn't like entry here was regulated. However, it had a brain work, please. However, it had the feel of a special zone where only certain people could enter, since it was full of giant corporate buildings. Even public places like shopping malls and parks were overrun with police and city regulations. Damn! Most wealth here was created in Newton City, and you could find famous tycoons with assets worth over 10 billion mools all over the place. Dang. If you had that much wealth, you'd undoubtedly be able to be on the forefront of when humanity took its next step. Money could make just about any desire you might have in this world come true. Not true, but a lot of people think that. In this world, money ruled all. Oh boy. Oh boy. I got one of those people. Like a photograph of the moment a drop of liquid hit a pool of water, a group of skyscrapers stood in the dead center of Newton City, while the buildings around that area were suddenly much shorter. You know, I kinda did notice that. Suddenly it just drops to nothing. Kind of odd. But then again, you can picture it like a water drop has just hit. There's the spike from it, and everything else was rippling. Not bad. That area was where middle-class people who worked in Newton City lived in, was called Green City, or the White Belt. It was a place full of people who loved words like high society and refinement. The kind of people who claimed to care about grace and harmony, but were really full of nothing but pride and obsessions with upward mobility. Whenever I went there, I felt sick seeing the sterilized rows of small, nicely manicured lawns and white-walled buildings. There wasn't a single piece of garbage on the streets, and the only plants around were domesticated trees on the roadside. Now, the not a single piece of garbage is good, because, oh my gosh, I have seen so much junk littered on the roads these days. Like, way too freaking much. After that, the buildings in the area around Green City got taller again, but it was a complete jumble. There, power lines dangled messily onto the streets, and vulgar neon signs lit the area, painting the whole place with a feel of squalor. The area was called the Outer Sections, and while technically they'd been all numbered from 1 to 8, there was no real point. Wait. Okay, so you're saying that those bars separate each and every one? Let me see here. If that's one line there, 2, 3, 4 lines. Hold on. 4. Holy crap, it does! If you consider Newton City the center of everything, the north was full of factories. There you could find silicon dioxide dissolution factories, fertilizer synthesis factories, automated plantations, and so on. On the east side was the village where I lived. That area was notorious for its hard-nosed residents. So over here? Oh dang. You could also find settlements of old-timers whom you might call artisans in the area, which made for a countless number of small workshops. Most people didn't have the luxury of being able to do something like transport wooden furniture via orbital elevator, and land was expensive on the moon. So the houses of Green City were small. As a result, handmade furniture created with the size and shape of your house in mind was far more popular than ready-made furniture. I can see why. I was told that my parents were aiming to live together with plants brought from Earth in exchange for making furniture out of wood. Even though factories existed that used the best scientific advances to maximize harvest rates as much as physically possible, they still grew plants by hand for some reason. Well, sometimes people like that kind of thing. They seemed to at least have their customers, but I didn't see a single enjoyable thing about being covered in dirt. It just made me wonder why they even came to the moon in the first place. This wasn't a place for stuff like that. The moon was supposed to be a place where you directed your gaze to the top of the inorganic buildings that line Newton City. I'm not so sure about that. And I shifted my eyes to the left. I saw an area haunted by those who couldn't keep up in that struggle. Here, when buildings started rusting, no one would bother to repaint them. It had been nicknamed the Red Valley. The reason it was called a valley was because when Newton City was originally built on a flat crater floor, all the low-income earners made the Rocky Mountains surrounding the city their home. By Rocky Mountains, I don't mean something like the harsh mountainous environments you might find on Earth. It was actually closer to what you might call highlands. As a result, the rock was chipped away to increase surface area like a river eroding hills, and many structures could be built in a tight area by terracing the slopes. Furthermore, more space was secured by digging caves into the rocky stretches. It was clearly evident that doing this over and over made for a mess of a city. Not surprised there. Not much more than a decade had passed since the city's establishment, and it had already become such a devilish haunt that you wouldn't blame the local government if they had just threw up their hands and gave up. As for me, I like the Red Valley with its level of squalor. While it was true that people living there could be called outcasts and failures, the place was irresponsible in a good way, and that put me at ease. Of course, I had no intentions of becoming the 20% that lived there. And finally, the area around where I was right now was called the 6th Outer Section. It was not as degenerate as the Red Valley, but it was not quite as productive as the east side of town. This area didn't even have a nickname yet. It's lackadaisical. Lackadaisical aspects oozed out at every turn. While the buildings were dirty and worn out, it was dotted with small companies who dreamed of Newton City and the occasional decent-looking house. So it wasn't the worst place to live in. I stood up, hopped back down to the street, and jogged off. What in the world? Fresh moon, fresh door, oh jeez. And is that the Pepsi logo? That's totally the Pepsi logo. Oh gosh. Now this is one heck of a spot for things, I guess. The road was paved with neatly shaved limestone rocks. It was chipped and cracked here and there, but no one ever tried to patch it. The rough dirt of the moon had piled up in its recesses. Waterways were occasionally visible, and in them you could see clear running water, as well as fish swimming. Oh, fish. While hydrogen was available on the moon, there was no water. So once hydrogen had been synthesized into water, it was made sure that every drop remained circulating within the dome. The waterways' final destination was the giant water processing plant under Newton City. In other words, everything was designed to gather in the center of the mortar-shaped city, whether it's people, water, or wealth. From there, everything was disseminated outward. After crossing the intricate waterways and bridges, I passed through a narrow alley and reached my destination. It was called the Lunar Chinese Restaurant. It's run by a Chinese husband and wife with a strong spirit of enterprise who emigrated to the moon. I could sit down here from early afternoon to whenever, and they wouldn't say a word. However, the elderly wife's health had been fading recently, and the woman who sometimes worked at the restaurant in their place was a bit of a pain. Oh jeez. I wonder why they're such a pain then. While I prayed that she wouldn't be there today, it was in vain, especially on an unlucky day already full of policemen and stock losses. Yep. As I open. Well. Hello there. It looks like he doesn't really like this chick. But I think we'll see the reason next time. So, I hope you all enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. And till next time, keep rad.